so once you do your first lab and get your first set of data, you're going to need to manipulate it and make a graph. So we're going to talk about some best practices for that and some important features that you need to know. We'll use a basic example for most of the video, and then we'll talk about a few extra features that you may use in some special cases. So for this, we're just using some generic example data with concentration and absorbance. The first thing you want to do is make sure your data is organized into columns, and you want to have a title for each of your columns. So in this case, we have concentration and absorbance. The next thing we want to do is make our graph. So what you're going to do is highlight all of your data, and you're not going to include the title cells, just the data. And then you're going to go to Insert and go to Recommended Charts. Now for ACER, most of the labs you're going to use the scatter with only markers. So when you click that, this is what you get. Excel is going to give you a generic graph, and then you need to kind of customize it to get it ready for submission. So what you're going to do to customize is click on your graph and go to Format up here, and this will open up this kind of tab that has all the options you need to customize your graph.
So every good graph needs a descriptive title. We'll open the chart title dropdown and customize it from there. The title of the graph will vary based on which experiment you're doing, but a good template to follow is dependent variable as a function of independent variable. You don't want to do x versus y, because sometimes that may be confusing. So for this one, we will call it absorbance as a function of concentration of blue dye. Absorbance as so that changes our title. You can also change the position and then the font and color of your title as well, but usually you'd want to keep it simple.
The next thing that we're going to do is try to minimize white space. So in order for your graph to earn fill credit, we don't want there to be a lot of white space, meaning that the ranges of the x and y axes should be just big enough to contain your data points, but not much bigger. So you can see here, our last data point is right here, and there's quite a lot of white space to the right here. So we're going to shrink the x-axis to make sure that there is less white space. So to do that, I'm just going to go to horizontal axis and look at the bounds. So for my x values, the greatest value is 1.02 times 10 to the negative fifth. I can see that over here. And so the maximum, I can maybe make it 1.05 times 10 to the negative fifth. And we'll just change that using the maximum here. If I enter that, we can see the graph looks a lot better. Excel will adjust the minimum bound if you adjust the maximum bound. So I just want to set this back to 0. And there we can see the graph looks a lot better. Now we can look at the y-axis. So we'll click vertical axis, and we have a little bit of extra space up at the top here. So I might look and see my last data point is around 1.2. So I think that we can make the maximum bound 1.2 instead of 1.4. And as you can see here, the graph is just a lot more contained, there's less white space, and so the scale of the graph is a lot more accurate. And so that's what we do for scaling.
So now we'll talk about labeling our axes. So we want to make sure that each axis is labeled with the correct units as well as having labels. So we can start with the horizontal axis, which we can change the title by scrolling down and turning on axis titles. And we can edit it in this text box. So for our horizontal axis, we'll want to label it concentration and include units as well. Concentration. And our units are measured in molarity, so we will put M in parentheses. That adds our first. And then now we want to do that for the vertical axis as well. So we can scroll down turn on axis titles. And for this one, our absorbance does not have units, so we will just change the axis title to absorbance. But in other cases where there is units, you want to put the units in parentheses as well.
The thing we want to do is take care of grid lines. So for ACER specifically, we do not want to turn in graphs with grid lines at all. And so we're just going to eliminate them. We're going to go to horizontal axis and go down to major grid lines and just turn them off. And we'll do the same thing for vertical axis, major grid lines, turn it off. And so now we just have our data points. We do not need those lines. Another thing that we should mention, we don't need a legend. We'll talk about legends more towards the end of the video. That's one of the more advanced features you might need for just a couple labs. But in this case, you only have one data set. And so when you only have one set of data on one graph, you don't need legends. So we're just gonna turn that off.